The first sign that something was wrong came on a night when the air felt too still. The barn stood quiet under a sky scattered with stars, the kind of calm that usually brought peace after a long day. Crickets chirped beyond the fence, and the faint smell of hay drifted through the open door. Inside, the horses rested, their breathing slow and even. It should have been just another ordinary night. Instead, it became the beginning of a story no one on that land would ever forget. The horse stood apart from the others, close to the far stall where the shadows gathered thickest. He was a strong animal, broad through the chest, with eyes that noticed everything. During the day he worked without trouble, pulling loads and carrying riders with steady patience. Nothing about him hinted at strangeness. If anything, he was known for being calm, reliable, the kind of horse people trusted without a second thought. That night, though, he did not rest. The man who owned the land had installed a small camera in the barn weeks earlier. It was meant for simple reasons, to keep an eye on the horses after a few incidents of missing feed and broken latches. No one expected much from it. It was just a quiet watcher, blinking its small light in the corner, capturing hours of nothing at all. As the moon climbed higher, the horse began to move. At first it was subtle, a shift of weight, a turn of the head toward the dark doorway. His ears flicked forward, then back, as if listening to something no one else could hear. The other horses remained still, heads low, unbothered. The silence in the barn deepened, broken only by the soft scrape of a hoof against wood. Then the horse stepped away from his stall. He moved slowly, carefully, as if testing the ground with each step. His eyes stayed fixed on the far end of the barn where the shadows were deepest. The camera caught it all, the quiet confidence in his walk, the way his body seemed alert but not afraid. He stopped near the center of the barn and stood there, unmoving, for a long moment. Outside, the wind picked up just enough to stir the hanging tarp near the door. It fluttered once, then settled. The horse did not react. Instead, he lowered his head and pressed his nose to the ground, breathing deep, as if reading a message written into the dirt. When he lifted his head again, his behavior changed. He pawed at the floor, not in agitation, but with purpose. Once, twice, he circled slowly, stopping every few steps to look toward the walls, the doors, the roof beams. The camera's lens followed him, capturing angles no human eye was there to see. Anyone watching later would swear the horse was searching for something or guarding against it. The man slept through it all, unaware that the quiet barn had become the stage for something unsettling. It was not until morning that the first questions began to form. At dawn, the man found the barn door unlatched. That alone was strange. He was careful about such things. He checked the horses first, counting them, running his hand along their necks, making sure none were hurt. All were present. All seemed calm. Except the horse from the far stall, who stood watching him with an intensity that made the man pause. There were marks on the barn floor, scuffs and lines where hooves had dragged. Near the door the dirt was disturbed, as if something heavy had been moved or pushed. The man frowned, trying to piece it together. He knew no one had been there overnight. The land was too far from town, the road too quiet. That was when he remembered the camera. Later that day, after the work was done and the sun had begun to sink again, he sat down to review the footage. He expected to find nothing more than shadows and stillness. What he saw instead made his breath catch. The screen showed the barn at night, the pale glow of moonlight slipping through the cracks. The horses stood as they should, heads low, bodies relaxed. Then the horse stepped forward, just as he had the night before, moving with the same quiet purpose. The man leaned closer, eyes narrowing, watching every detail. The horse's actions grew more unsettling the longer the footage played. He moved from one end of the barn to the other, stopping at each door, each wall, as if checking them. At one point he stood directly beneath the camera and looked up. His eye filled the screen, dark and reflective, sending a chill through the man who watched. Why would a horse behave this way at night? The footage continued. The horse returned to the center of the barn and stood perfectly still. Minutes passed. Nothing else moved. Then, without warning, the horse reared slightly and struck the ground with his front hooves. Not wildly, not in fear. It looked deliberate. The man paused the video, heart pounding. He replayed it again and again, searching for an explanation. There was no sound of predators, no sign of intruders. No storm, just the horse acting with intention under the cover of darkness. By the next evening, the man could not shake the feeling that something was being hidden from him. He shared the footage with a few neighbors, careful about who he trusted. Some laughed it off, saying animals did strange things at night. Others watched in silence, their expressions tight, eyes lingering on the screen longer than necessary. One neighbor mentioned old stories, passed down quietly, about horses sensing things people could not. Another warned him not to ignore signs that came without reason. The words stayed with him, echoing louder once the sun went down. That night, the man returned to the barn after dark. He did not turn on the lights. He stood just inside the door, letting his eyes adjust, listening to the familiar sounds of breathing and shifting straw. The horses were calm. The far stall was quiet. The camera blinked its small red light, ready to record again. The hours passed slowly. Just when he began to believe nothing would happen, the horse lifted his head. His ears locked forward, his body tensed. The man held his breath. The horse stepped out of the stall. Watching it happen in person was different. The weight of each step seemed heavier, the silence sharper. The man stayed hidden, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever was unfolding. The horse walked toward the same shadowed corner, nose low, breathing deep. Then he stopped. His head snapped toward the closed barn door, muscles tightening beneath his coat. The man felt a sudden chill crawl up his spine. There was nothing there. No sound, no movement. And yet the horse stood ready, as if facing something just beyond sight. The camera kept recording. As the horse shifted his weight and pawed at the ground once more, the man realized this was no random behavior. Whatever the horse was doing, he was doing it for a reason that had not yet revealed itself. The night stretched on, heavy with unanswered questions. And somewhere between the quiet breathing of the horses and the steady blink of the camera light, the man understood that the truth captured on that footage would change how everyone saw that barn forever. The horse took one more step forward, eyes fixed on the darkness ahead, and the screen continued to record, holding secrets that were not ready to be understood yet. The man stayed frozen near the barn door, his heart beating loud enough that he was sure the horse could hear it. The horse did not turn. He stood facing the darkness, muscles tight, tail still, as if waiting for a signal only he understood. The camera's small light blinked steadily, recording every second without judgment. The man told himself to move, to speak, to do something that would make sense of the moment, yet his feet would not obey. At last, the horse lowered his head and stepped back, slow and careful, returning to his stall as if nothing unusual had happened. The tension in the barn loosened just enough for the man to breathe again. He waited longer, watching, listening, but the night offered nothing more. When he finally left the barn, the feeling followed him, heavy and unresolved, like a question without words. The next morning, daylight softened everything. The barn looked ordinary again, worn boards glowing warm in the sun. The horse stood calm, chewing hay, eyes half closed. If not for the footage saved on the camera, the man might have convinced himself it had all been in his head. Still, the memory clung to him. He replayed the video again, slowing it down, studying each movement. The horse's actions felt too steady, too focused to be random. The man had grown up around horses. He knew their habits, their moods, the small signs that warned of trouble. This was different. There was no fear in the horse's eyes, no panic in his body. What he saw instead looked like duty, like the animal believed it had a task to complete each night. He began to watch more closely during the day. The horse behaved as always, eating well, working steady, responding to touch and voice without issue. Yet there were moments when his attention drifted, ears turning toward empty space, eyes following nothing visible. The man noticed how often the horse stood near the same corner of the barn, even in daylight, as if drawn to it. Curiosity spread beyond the farm. The man shared more footage with a few trusted people, careful not to invite ridicule or panic. Reactions varied. Some dismissed it as boredom or instinct. Others admitted the behavior unsettled them. One older neighbor spoke quietly about nights when animals had warned of things people missed, fires before smoke, storms before clouds. He said animals noticed changes in the land, shifts in air and ground that humans overlooked. That idea stayed with the man. He walked the property, checking fences, testing the ground near the barn. Everything looked solid. Still, he felt watched, not by anything threatening, but by the land itself, as if it were holding something back. The nights continued, and so did the horse's behavior. Each time, the pattern was similar. The horse waited until the barn settled, until the other animals slept. Then he moved, slow and deliberate, making his rounds. Sometimes he paused beneath the camera again, lifting his head just enough that his eye caught the lens. Watching the footage later always sent a chill through the man, not because it felt dangerous, but because it felt personal, like the horse knew he was being seen. One night something changed. The horse reached the far corner and stopped, ears forward, body angled slightly as if bracing. He pawed the ground once, harder than before. The sound echoed sharp in the quiet barn. The other horses stirred but did not rise. The man, watching from the house through the camera feed, leaned closer to the screen. The horse lowered his head and pressed his nose to a narrow gap where the barn wall met the floor. The camera caught the motion clearly. He breathed deep, then snorted softly, stepping back with sudden caution. The man's pulse quickened. He had never noticed that gap before. At first light he went to the barn and examined the spot. The wood was old, the boards warped slightly with age. There was nothing obvious, no hole, no sign of animals passing through. Still, the ground felt colder there, damp in a way the rest of the floor was not. He knelt and touched it, unsure what he expected to find. That afternoon, clouds gathered low and heavy, pressing down on the land. The air felt charged, thick with the promise of rain. The horse grew restless earlier than usual, pacing his stall, ears flicking toward the same corner. The man felt a growing sense of urgency, though he could not explain why. When night came, he chose not to hide this time. He brought a lantern into the barn and sat quietly near the wall, far enough not to disturb the horses. The camera recorded as always. The hours passed slowly. The lantern cast long shadows that stretched and shifted with every small movement. The man listened to his own breathing, steadying himself. The horse lifted his head. Even expecting it, the moment sent a ripple through the man. The horse stepped out, moving with the same careful purpose. He reached the corner and paused. The man raised the lantern slightly, light spilling across the boards. The horse did not startle. He turned his head just enough to look at the man, their eyes meeting in a silent exchange that felt heavier than words. Then the horse returned his attention to the wall. He pawed at the ground again, scraping dirt away from the base of the boards. The sound filled the barn, rough and persistent. The man stood slowly, heart racing, unsure whether to stop him or let it continue. Something told him not to interfere. With a final scrape, the ground shifted. A small section near the wall collapsed inward, revealing a dark hollow beneath. Cool air rose from it, carrying a smell the man could not place, not rot, not damp, something older. The horse stepped back, snorting softly, eyes fixed on the opening. The man approached with caution, lantern held out. The hollow was not deep, but it extended under the barn, a narrow space carved by time and water. He realized then that the barn sat over an old channel, long forgotten, slowly eating away at the foundation. Understanding struck hard and fast. The horse had not been restless without reason. He had sensed the shift, the danger beneath their feet. Each night he had checked, guarded, warned in the only way he knew how. Before the man could act on that realization, the wind rose suddenly outside, rattling the barn doors. Thunder rolled in the distance, closer than before. The ground beneath the hollow trembled, just enough to send a shiver through him. The horse backed away from the corner, muscles tense, eyes wide now, no longer calm. The man felt the weight of what might happen if the storm broke hard, if the weakened ground gave way. The camera continued to record as the first drops of rain struck the roof, faster and harder. The hollow seemed to widen by a fraction, dirt crumbling at the edges. The man grabbed a post to steady himself, lantern shaking in his hand. The horse let out a sharp sound, loud and urgent, a warning that cut through the rising storm. The man understood then that the night's work was far from over. As thunder cracked overhead and the barn creaked in protest, the man and the horse stood facing the same threat, bound by a truth revealed to ignore. The camera captured every detail, light and shadow dancing across the walls, holding the moment suspended as the storm closed in and the land prepared to decide what would stand and what would fall. The rain came down harder, striking the roof in uneven bursts that echoed through the barn. The man stood near the hollow in the ground, lantern raised, trying to understand how something so dangerous had gone unnoticed for so long. The horse remained a few steps back, head high, eyes locked on the dark opening as if it might move on its own. The other horses had risen now, shifting in their stalls, sensing the unease without knowing its cause. The man backed away slowly, careful not to step too close to the weakened spot. His thoughts raced. The barn had stood here longer than he had been alive. It had weathered storms, seasons, and neglect. Yet beneath it, the land had been changing quietly, patiently, waiting for the right moment to give way. The idea unsettled him more than the storm itself. He thought of the nights he had slept soundly while the horse stood guard. Night after night the animal had walked the barn, checking the walls, pawing at the ground, listening to shifts too subtle for human senses. The camera had captured the actions, but only now did their meaning come into focus. The horse had been warning him all along. Another roll of thunder shook the air. The hollow let out a soft crumble as a bit of dirt fell inward. The sound made the man flinch. If the ground gave way completely, the barn could collapse. The horses inside would have no chance to escape. Panic pressed at the edges of his mind, but he forced himself to breathe. He moved quickly to open the main doors wider, letting fresh air and rain blow in. The wind carried the sharp smell of wet earth. The horse watched him, ears flicking, ready to move. The man spoke aloud, though his voice was nearly lost in the storm. He told the horse it was all right, even though he did not fully believe it himself. From the house, a light flicked on. Someone else was awake now. A figure appeared in the doorway, holding a coat over their head, staring toward the barn. The storm had drawn attention. Soon others might follow. The man waved, signaling them to stay back, unsure how stable the ground was. Inside the barn, tension thickened. One of the horses stamped, another let out a nervous snort. The warning horse stepped forward again, closer to the hollow, then stopped abruptly. He lowered his head, ears flat, reading the ground like a map only he could see. The man followed his gaze, heart pounding. Water began to seep into the hollow, darkening the soil. The channel beneath the barn was filling fast. Each drop of rain added weight to the already weakened ground. The man realized this was not just about one storm. It was about years of slow erosion, hidden beneath routine and familiarity. He thought about the camera, still recording, its silent eye capturing the truth no one had wanted to see. If not for that footage, he might have blamed the horse for strange behavior and dismissed the rest. Instead, he stood here now, faced with a choice that could not wait. Outside, voices rose as neighbors gathered at a safe distance, drawn by the storm and the open barn doors. They shouted questions he could barely hear. He waved them closer, then motioned them back again, trying to explain the danger with gestures alone. The horse suddenly backed away from the hollow, hooves scraping loudly. The ground shifted again, more dirt sliding inward. A sharp crack echoed from beneath the floorboards. The sound cut through the storm like a warning bell. Fear rippled through the barn. The man moved fast, grabbing a lead rope and slipping it over the horse's neck. He did not pull. He simply held it, grounding both of them. The horse did not resist. He stood alert, trusting, eyes still locked on the threat beneath them. Another horse tried to turn in its stall, confused and frightened. The man shouted for help, his voice finally carrying over the rain. Two neighbors ran forward, stopping short when he pointed at the ground. Their faces tightened as understanding dawned. They argued in quick, urgent bursts about what to do. Move the horses now, or risk the ground collapsing under the rush. Wait it out, or lose everything if the storm worsened. No answer felt right. Time pressed in from all sides. The warning horse stamped once, sharp and loud, drawing their attention. He pulled slightly toward the open doors, then stopped, looking back. The message was clear. He was not panicking. He was choosing a direction. The man felt a surge of respect and fear all at once. He had trusted this horse with work and routine. Now he was being asked to trust him with lives. Rainwater ran in small streams across the barn floor, skirting the hollow but creeping closer. The lantern flickered as wind pushed through the open doors. Shadows leapt along the walls, turning familiar shapes into something wild. One neighbor moved to open a side gate, creating another exit. Another ran back toward the house to fetch more light. The man stayed near the warning horse, eyes scanning the ground for any new signs of collapse. For a moment, everything seemed to hold. The storm paused between bursts, rain easing just enough to let them hear the barn groan under strain. The hollow did not widen further, but it did not close either. It waited. The man looked at the camera mounted high in the corner. Its small light blinked steadily, indifferent to the danger. He wondered who would watch this footage later, who would finally understand what the horse had been trying to say all along. The thought gave him a strange sense of calm. Another crack sounded beneath their feet, louder than before. Dust fell from the beams. The horse snorted sharply, muscles tightening. The man tightened his grip on the rope, pulse racing. Outside, lightning flashed, turning night into stark white for a split second. In that light, the hollow looked larger, deeper, like an open mouth waiting to swallow whatever stood above it. The neighbors shouted again, urging him to move the horses now. The man hesitated, torn between fear and timing. One wrong move could trigger the collapse they were trying to avoid. The warning horse shifted his weight, stepping carefully toward the door, testing the ground with each hoof. He stopped, then stepped again. The floor held, just barely. The man followed, heart in his throat. Behind them, the hollow creaked and settled, dirt sliding softly inward. The sound chased them forward. The other horses sensed the movement and began to follow, tension building with every step. The storm roared back to life, rain hammering down as if urging them on. The man knew they were running out of time. The horse moved with steady purpose, guiding the path through danger he alone seemed to understand. As they neared the open doors, the barn shuddered, a deep tremor rolling through its frame. Everyone froze. The ground beneath the hollow sank another inch, sending a spray of dirt into the air. The camera kept recording, capturing the chaos, the fear, the trust between man and horse. The outcome remained uncertain, balanced on the edge of seconds. And as thunder crashed overhead and the barn groaned under the weight of the storm, the warning horse took another careful step forward, leading them into the night, while the land behind them decided how much more it was willing to give up. The night felt alive, charged with sound and movement, as if the land itself had decided to speak all at once. Rain slammed against the ground outside the barn, turning dirt into slick mud underfoot. The warning horse moved carefully through the open doorway, each step measured, ears locked forward. The man followed close behind, rope tight in his hand, afraid that if he loosened it even a little, everything might fall apart. Behind them, the barn groaned again, a deep, low sound that vibrated through the beams. One of the neighbors cried out, pointing back toward the hollow. The man did not turn. He trusted what the horse was showing him, the path he had chosen through danger. The other horses hesitated, crowding near the door, eyes wide, bodies tense. Fear rolled through them like a wave. Lightning flashed, turning the night sharp and white. For a split second, the man saw the ground near the barn sink further, the hollow widening as rainwater rushed into it. The sight burned into his mind. If they stayed even a moment longer, there would be no saving anything left behind. "Easy," he whispered, voice shaking. He did not know if the horse could hear him over the storm, but the word felt necessary, a thin line of calm in the chaos. The warning horse stepped onto the yard, hooves sinking slightly into the wet earth. He paused, head turning, reading the ground again. The man felt the rope tug gently, not a pull of panic, but a request to follow. He stepped forward, heart hammering, trusting that the horse sensed something solid beneath the mud. The neighbors shouted from behind, urging the other horses to move. One slipped, scrambling to regain footing, sending a spike of fear through everyone watching. The man's breath came short. Every sound felt louder now, sharper, as if the storm had stripped away all softness from the world. The horse led them a few steps farther, then stopped abruptly. His ears flattened, nostrils flaring as he stamped once, testing the ground. The man froze. Water pooled around their boots and hooves, running in fast-moving lines toward the lower fields. The land was shifting, changing shape under the weight of the storm. Another crack echoed from the barn. A beam gave way somewhere inside, wood snapping under pressure. The sound tore through the night, followed by a rush of dirt collapsing inward. Dust and mist burst from the open doors. The neighbors stumbled back, shouting warnings. The man turned just enough to see the barn sag, its frame twisting as the hollow finally gave more ground. He felt a cold rush of fear at the thought of how close they had come to being trapped inside. His gaze snapped back to the horse. The animal stood steady, eyes bright, focused, as if aware that this moment was not finished yet. Rain stung the man's face as the wind shifted. He could barely see more than a few yards ahead. The horse moved again, angling toward higher ground near the fence line. The man followed, boots sliding in the mud, muscles burning as he fought to keep his balance. Behind them, the other horses finally surged forward, urged by fear and the voices of the neighbors. The yard filled with movement, bodies brushing past one another, hooves thudding hard against the earth. Panic threatened to take over, but the warning horse kept his pace steady, refusing to rush. The camera inside the barn continued to record, capturing the empty stalls, the collapsing floor, the truth laid bare by disaster. No one saw it now, but its silent witness mattered, even if they did not yet understand how. The man felt the rope tighten suddenly. The horse had stopped again. They stood near the fence, rain pouring down, thunder rolling close enough to shake the air. The horse lowered his head, sniffing the ground, then lifted it sharply. His body tensed, muscles coiling beneath his coat. The man's stomach dropped. Something was wrong here too. Water surged past their feet, faster now, carving channels through the yard. The fence posts leaned, straining against the softening earth. The man realized with a jolt that the storm had turned the entire area into a trap. Higher ground was shrinking by the minute. A neighbor ran up beside him, face pale, shouting that the lower field was flooding fast. Another yelled that the road was nearly washed out. Escape routes were closing one by one, the land reshaping itself with ruthless speed. The warning horse stamped again, harder this time, then swung his head toward a narrow rise near the old shed. It was not much, but it was something. The man followed his gaze, measuring the distance, the risk. Getting there would mean crossing a stretch of ground already slick and unstable. Thunder cracked overhead so loud it felt like it split the sky. The horse flinched but did not retreat. Instead he leaned forward, ready. The man swallowed, fear thick in his throat. He tightened his grip and nodded, a silent agreement between them. They moved. Each step felt like a gamble. Mud sucked at their feet, trying to pull them back. Water splashed up around their legs. The man slipped once, barely catching himself before going down. The horse stopped immediately, bracing, giving him time to recover. That small act of awareness sent a surge of gratitude through him. Behind them, the other horses followed as best they could, guided by the neighbors' shouts and gestures. One cried out as a hoof sank deep into the mud, but with help, it freed itself and staggered on. The storm showed no mercy, rain pounding harder, wind howling through trees that bent and groaned. The old shed loomed ahead, dark and unwelcoming, but the ground around it rose just enough to offer hope. The warning horse reached it first and stopped, turning back to watch the others. He stood firm, body planted, as if claiming the space as safe. The man reached his side, chest heaving, clothes soaked through. He leaned against the horse for a brief moment, drawing strength from the solid warmth beneath his hand. The horse did not move away, but the danger was not over. A roar rose from behind them, louder than the thunder. The man turned just in time to see a section of the barn collapse completely, the roof caving inward as the ground beneath it vanished. Water and debris surged into the opening, swallowing what remained of the floor. The sight stole his breath. The neighbors shouted again, urging the last of the horses forward. Panic flared as one hesitated, confused by the noise and chaos. The warning horse lifted his head and let out a sharp, commanding sound, cutting through the storm. The hesitant horse startled, then moved, breaking free of its fear. The man watched in awe and dread. The horse was not just reacting. He was leading. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the flooded yard, the broken barn, the narrow rise where they now stood crowded together. The storm had turned everything familiar into something dangerous and strange. Water continued to rise, creeping closer to the shed. The man realized this place might not hold much longer either. The land was still shifting, still deciding where it would give and where it would hold. He looked at the horse, rain streaming down his face, and wondered how much more the animal could sense, how much more danger lay ahead that he could not yet see. The camera had captured the warning, but it could not capture what came next. The storm showed no sign of easing. Thunder rolled again, closer than before, and the ground beneath them shuddered slightly, just enough to send a ripple of fear through the group. The warning horse shifted his stance, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the shed, ears flicking toward a sound carried by the wind. The man followed his gaze, heart sinking as he realized the night was far from finished. Somewhere ahead, the land moved again, unseen but felt, and the path to safety remained uncertain, balanced on moments that could tip either way at any second. The wind howled past the old shed, carrying rain sideways and pressing everyone close together. The warning horse stood firm at the front, head high, legs braced, as if he were holding the line between danger and survival. The man wiped rain from his eyes and forced himself to think past the fear. Panic would only waste time they no longer had. Another rumble rolled beneath their feet, softer than before but deep enough to feel. The ground shifted, then settled. The man waited, heart pounding, until he was sure it would not give way again. Slowly, carefully, he led the horse a few steps farther around the shed, testing the earth with each movement. It held. Behind them, the neighbors worked together, guiding the other horses into a tighter group, keeping them calm with steady voices and gentle hands. The animals pressed close, their warmth a small comfort against the cold rain. Fear still flickered in their eyes, but it no longer ruled them. Minutes passed. The storm began to lose its edge. Rain still fell, but the thunder drifted farther away, rolling low instead of cracking overhead. The wind eased just enough for everyone to hear their own breathing again. The land, for now, seemed to have spent its anger. When the man finally dared to look back toward the barn, the sight made his chest ache. What had once been a familiar shelter now lay broken and hollowed, its roof caved in, its floor swallowed by mud and rushing water. The truth was clear. If they had stayed even moments longer, the outcome would have been unthinkable. As dawn approached, gray light crept across the sky, softening the damage left behind. The storm faded into a steady drizzle, then into silence broken only by dripping water and tired sighs. The horses stood quietly now, exhaustion settling in where fear had been. The man rested a hand on the warning horse's neck, feeling the steady rise and fall beneath his palm. Gratitude welled up stronger than words. This animal had noticed what no human had. He had walked the barn at night, pawed at the ground, stared into shadows, not out of restlessness or fear, but awareness. The camera had captured every detail, proof that instinct and intelligence often spoke without sound. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, neighbors gathered closer, surveying the damage in full light. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others stared at the horse with new respect. The man shared the footage later that day, replaying the nights of quiet warning. Watching it now, with the outcome known, sent chills through everyone present. Questions found their answers. The horse had sensed the slow erosion beneath the barn, the shifting ground and trapped water long before it reached the surface. Each night patrol had been an act of vigilance, a silent effort to draw attention to danger. The camera had not created the miracle. It had revealed it. In the days that followed, the land began to dry. Help came from every direction. Neighbors worked together to secure the remaining structures and mark the unstable ground. Plans were made to rebuild, this time on safer footing. Loss was felt, but it was matched by relief that no lives had been taken. The warning horse became something more than a working animal in the eyes of the community. People spoke of him with respect, even wonder. Children stood by the fence to watch him graze, whispering stories that would grow larger with time. The man smiled at that, knowing the truth was simpler and deeper. The horse had listened when the land spoke. At night, the camera remained in place, still recording, though the barn it once watched was gone. The horse slept peacefully now, his restless patrols no longer needed. The man slept better too, comforted by the knowledge that awareness and trust had carried them through. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, the man would replay the footage one more time. not out of fear but respect. It reminded him that warning signs often come softly, that answers can stand right in front of us if we are willing to look and listen. The storm became a story told often, especially to those who doubted the bond between people, animals, and land. It was a story about a horse whose night actions shocked everyone, about a camera that captured every detail, and about a choice to trust instinct over habit. As seasons changed and new grass grew where mud once ruled, the man watched the warning horse move across the fields with calm confidence. The land had settled. The danger had passed. What remained was a lesson written into memory. Some nights were quiet again, just crickets and wind through grass. And in that peace, the man understood that survival had not come from strength alone, but from attention, patience, and the courage to believe that wisdom can come on four legs, moving silently through the dark.